Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Stewart. I'm the CEO of QC Copper and Gold. We're traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol QCCU. I'm very pleased to be joined here today by our Vice President of Exploration and Director, Charles Beaudry. He is the brains behind everything we've accomplished at the Opemiska. And what we've accomplished, of course, is we published a maiden resource back at the end of last year of over 100 million tons at nearly 0.9% copper equivalent. And we've since financed ourselves very well. And we are in the process of expanding that resource. We've got 60,000 meters planned for the first 6 to 7 months of this year. Lots of news flow coming, and all will be culminated in an updated resource estimate towards the end of 2022.
Stephen, Charles, nice to meet you both. Thank you very much, Stephen, for the introduction. That's a great introduction. Now, I'm confessing my ignorance here. I'm completely new to QC Copper and Gold. It was the first time I've really come across you. I watched some of the Crux interviews. I've been through the presentation, and I'm really interested in getting into the bones of this because it looks like a fascinating story. And I just wonder if you could. One of the things I saw, you've got a photograph in there from I think 1954 of the process plant. Working. Could you just kind of, in very high level, talk about how it went from, I think it was Falconbridge operation in the 50s to where it's sitting now as a kind of a derelict kind of, it was an underground mine. Is it just kind of nothing else? When did it close down?
Okay, so the deposit was discovered back in the late 20s or early 30s. And there was some work that was done, including they put down a shaft in the 30s, but then there was just no infrastructure in the region. And it was only when they opened up the road from Lac Saint-Jean up to Chibougamau, because as you know, they were discovering deposits in the Chibougamau district itself. And when they opened up the road, it basically made the Chapais camp economic. And Falconbridge had that since the 30s. And they developed the deposit, the original Springer deposit, on an initial shaft, and then what you can see on our slide. Can I show that?
Yeah, sure. And sorry, you've just used three names there. You used Springer, Chapais, and Opemiska. So are these all referring to the same thing?
So okay, Chapais is the town that you can see behind the head frames.
Yeah.
Okay. Opemiska is the overall project, okay, and our resource is sitting on two different mines, okay. It's called the Springer, which basically is sitting underneath the old mill and to the left, and to the right, and the Perry mine, which is located to the left of that image, and so. So the mining started in 53, principally on the number 3 vein, and in 1953 the initial production started with they were mining very high grades underground from the Springer mine, and principally on the number 3 vein, and they mined, and eventually they opened up the Perry in the early 60s, I think. And eventually they developed two other satellite deposits in the camp called the Cook and the Robitaille, which both of those mines are located on an adjacent property, which we also have optioned off, and we are moving towards 100% acquisition, as we are with the Opemiska property itself.
And they were high grade, narrow vein.
Yeah, what's interesting, and it's going to come back in a bit later. What's interesting is that, when you think of orogenic structural deposits in the Abitibi, in the Archean, like whether in the Abitibi or even in Australia, it's basically the same. You have these very deep structures that are mineralized, and your deposits tend to be very linear oriented. Here, it's a very different beast because we're dealing with essentially a multiple vein system that occurs over a very wide area. Okay, it occurs over a wide area, and the veins are all produced in response to the deformation in a thick gabbro peroxenite sill.
Okay. So you've got the feeder structure next to a.
Yeah, well, that's my interpretation, right?
You've got a feeder structure next to something which is brittle, which has fractured, and that fracture pattern has enabled the fluids to kind of come through it.
Excellent. That's exactly the interpretation. This, by the way, is controversial. Strangely, it's controversial, okay. But that's another story for a bunch of geeks around a beer. But
well, you say that, but you say a bunch of geeks, but you're going to find out this year, because if you're going to be Steve, just to be clear, what you're going to be doing this year is you're going to be drilling around these high grade zones to see what the infill is, the halos. That's the basic thesis for the year's work, isn't it?
Correct, and it's important because the reason why we're doing this is a consequence of the history of the project. Okay, essentially, what happened was, as you know, interpreting these deposits is not just a question of saying, okay, the geology is going like this or like that. It's really about digitizing a bunch of wireframes and building volumetrics from those wireframes, and then interpolating grades within them. Right? That's the way we do it. So so there's different ways of doing these things. And when we did the original wireframing work was before we even started drilling on the project in 2019. We added to that later on, but it was essentially what we did was we basically started by digitizing all the stopes, which are still there. I mean, those don't change because they're physical bodies. But then we put around the stopes, we put envelopes of mineralization, which we called our veins. Okay, low grade veins, if you want. And what?
Sorry, just to be clear, when you said that the stopes were planar.
Yeah.
Did you do a search? Did you search for the mineralization kind of on the plane of that,
correct.
or did you do any kind of interpolation of the grade away from the plane of the mineralization or not?
What we did
on that plane?
Yeah, that's right. What we did was we had the stopes, okay, and I'll get back to the stope in a second. What we did with the assays inside them, but we knew, and we could see from the original drilling and from the underground maps and all that stuff, we could see that there was a lot of low grade mineralization left in the wall rocks. They were limited because of the way they were mining this stuff. They were limited to a cutoff grade of 1.5%. And the mineralization decreases away from the core of the veins gradually. There is a clear-cut structure typically associated with the high-grade vein, but the wall rocks, particularly around Springer, the wall rocks are all busted, and the wall rocks are all mineralized. So the fluids, it's exactly like you said. In the way we interpret it is that the fluids basically came up the Willem Fault, and then they moved into the hinterland, right? They moved into these structures that were produced when the sill was folded as a result of movement along that fault. And so the fluids moved into these structures, these axial planar, if you want, structures and radial structures, and they moved up and away from those structures into the wall rock. So it created this amazing, several football fields of veins, high-grade veins with stopes, and surrounded by a bunch of low-grade material. So it's really, this is the irony of it, and in hindsight, it's really obvious that this was a really great candidate for. So it's a really great candidate for open pit mining.
Yeah, it's a bulk mining target. Okay,
that's right.
I've got two questions. So
yes.
The first question is: in the old days, how much vertical continuity did they have? Did they go down on the same structure, or were they hunting around? Does the mineralization jump between planes, and how much vertical continuity have you got?
Mostly, okay, so in fact it's both, okay, in a way it's both, but mostly it's just these major structures, okay, that were mined, and these things, they go down, but they don't go down forever because they're constrained, and I'll show you, they're constrained by the fold, right? They're constrained by the fold, so the contact of that fold is the contact of the sill, and when you get into the underlying rocks in the volcanics, the structures are still there, but they're not nearly as well mineralized. Okay,
so it's a rheological contrast. It's a competence-free. It's the way that
chemical because these rocks are iron rich, right? And that we know it's very favorable for mineralization.
Okay, so just for the rheology is the way that a rock will flow in different temperatures and pressures. And so what you're basically saying is that the gabbroic sill, was it gabbroic or was it diorite? Gabbroic sill, which has got a certain chemistry and it behaves in a certain way under certain temperatures and pressures, was more brittle than the surrounding volcanic rocks, and therefore it fractured better, so that the fluid and the chemistry. So there was a pressure drop and a chemical element to it, which encouraged the precipitation of the sulfide minerals. As a preferential host.
That's right. And what makes it attractive, what makes it interesting from an economic point of view, is the fact that there are several veins that go over a wide zone. And we, in addition, so we had the two vein systems at Perry to the northeast, which the veins are more radial relative to the fold structure instead of being axial planar. And then you have Springer, which is more axial planar along almost parallel to the fold axis. And these structures, they're steep, but they dip to the north and they go down to the contact and they go beyond. But it's really, the mineralization is focused along that contact and in the gabbro. Okay.
And sorry, another question is there any dissemination within the gabbro, or is it all on?
No, it's really all structural. But when I say structural, when you look at it, when you look at rock that's at cutoff grade, it looks like nothing. It just looks like gabbro, maybe sometimes with a bit of bleaching, not very much, and then you get these fractures in the gabbro. And they have these chalcopyrite veinlets in the gabbro. When you get up to 1% copper, then obviously you see a lot more veinlets and stuff like that. But it's the cutoff grade is really, most of the geologists can't recognize it.
And is it a vein density thing? And presumably, when you've got higher vein densities, you've got some veins which are thicker, wider as well, so you can increase your volume as well as the number of veins.
Yes, that's right. And the wider the vein, that we see, the wider the stope, if you want, the wider the stope. Okay, the wider the halo around it, as a general rule. But it's not strictly speaking, because it moves back and forth. And where you have multiple veins that kind of in the same area, you get overlapping of these halos, and the mineralization becomes more continuous.
Okay, right. Before we go down too much of a geological rabbit hole, let's just put our heads out again.
Okay, so
and just remind me when. Can I just ask, sorry, when did the underground mine close and how long has it been?
1991. Okay, decommissioned everything, removed everything, the mill, everything. The tailings were decommissioned also. So and then Falconbridge left town. Okay. Wow. Okay, that's and since then it's been sitting there. In 1994, the property was acquired by the vendor, that the people who we optioned the property from. And they, for a period of 30 years, they had this thing, and they did some work. I would say overall they did about maybe 8,000 meters of drilling overall over the 30 some almost 30 years, 25 years, and they looked at different options, but it was always, for the most part, it was trying to bootstrap the project, and they were never able to do that. And there's a number of groups that looked at this over the years, but nobody really, they could not come to terms with what they were looking at. And
when did you switch from thinking, hang on, this is a structural?
I was involved personally in the project since 2007. Okay. I started looking at this thing, and I knew the vendor. It was a guy I'd worked with in the past, Edwin Gaucher, who's an entrepreneur from Quebec City, and he's really well known in Quebec. And he asked me to look at this because I'm like I said, he's a geophysicist, and my initial take was, when I started looking at the historical maps, was that there was a lot of mineralization in the wall rock. Whether we could do something with it wasn't so clear, but certainly there was a lot of mineralization, and it didn't originally hit me, the impact of this geometry of these football fields full of these veins, and how that would relate back to the economics of mining. And but what I did recommend at that time was that you start digitizing the information, because it's the only way that we could get the data in the format that other people could evaluate. And so they initially did digitize all the logs. There were 16,500 drill logs from the period, and he captured all of the collar information, the downhole survey information, and the assays. That's it. Didn't digitize the geology because it's just too complex to do that.
And
so we
so
had
you
this
could,
information.
So you could see the grade halos around because if you had some cross-cutting drill holes, you could see the grade. You could see the grade distribution. We could see it in the underground maps too, right? We could see there's a lot of chip sampling in the underground, and we could see that there was mineralization. And in the drill holes, what we could see was typically is that they would sample the high-grade copper veins, and all of the low-grade stuff they wouldn't really sample very much, unless it was very near the mining stopes where they needed to have the assay boundary, and in which case, but beyond that, where all of the low-grade material basically went unsampled. And I think your cutoff, conceptual cutoff, is 0.2% copper, isn't it?
Yes, it's right now. That's what we used in last fall. Depending on the size of the project, that could and also the long-term price of copper, that could go down a bit for us. But in any event, at the average grade that we're looking at, we have a lot of room. There's it's a very robust grade compared to the cutoff.
And how much internal waste is there, kind of in your current pit?
Quite a bit, obviously, because of the average grade, right? When you do an optimized pit, you know that it will dig your software, the algorithm will dig until you get an inversion of the growth of your NPV, right? That's how it works. And so at the 0.85 equivalent copper average grade, the strip ratio is quite high. I mean, officially we're not allowed to talk about it because we don't have a PEA, but it's it's over 5 and less than 10, let's say. Yeah. But the thing is that, and getting back to our fundamental problem of the resource in the pit, is that when we digitized these veins back in 2019, we didn't have a lot of drilling. We had, we didn't have any of our drilling, or basically none of our drilling, and so we put our envelopes on the basis of the information that we had. But then when we drilled in 2019 and 2021, particularly, it became very evident that there was quite a lot of assays or grades, low grade, but there was a lot of mineralization that was sitting outside these vein envelopes
and above your cutoff.
Yes, right. Well, obviously there was above our cutoff, but at 0.2, it's not, as you know, it's not very much, and so we added another category called the halos, which was for want of a better term. We used that category, and but what happened was when we did the interpolation on these halos, they were very conservative in the way they did it. So they were using a 20-meter search radius, and essentially the mineralization collapsed around the drill holes. Okay, so and we were fairly far away from the stopes as a general rule, and there was.
So when you say search radius, it was kind of a horizontal search radius.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it was really it's spherical for the most part. It was spherical.
Okay.
Spherical.
Yeah.
And so when we did the audit of the block model last fall, after the publication of the resource, it became very, very clear that outside of the block model, there's still quite a bit of grade, and so we decided that we and this is our main focus right now, is to go back, looking at the block model and seeing exactly, because all of that, remember, the halo mineralization, it's all inferred. There's no indicate. We have 80 million tons of measured and indicated, okay, but only 20 million tons of inferred, but it's basically all in the halo. And so we are convinced that by drilling extensively, away from the original veins into the halo features, particularly in the footwall of the veins, which are undersampled for historical reasons, because we chose until now not to drill, not to spend a lot of effort drilling through the stopes because of engineering difficulties. But this year, this is going to be one of our focus, is drilling through the stopes to get sampling in the footwall of the veins of each of these veins, the major veins, anyways. And
okay.
and so that
Sorry, could I just ask,
yeah,
how much drilling? You said you did some drilling in 2019 and 2020, and
3,500.
You did 3,500 meters over the
2019,
2 years.
yeah,
2019,
and 16,000.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we did 3,500 meters in 2019 ourselves. There was 8,000 meters done by the previous owners.
Yeah,
we did, and then in 2021, we did 20,000 meters ourselves. And since then, let's call it starting in November, December, out till about June, July, we have 60,000 meters planned. And those 60,000 meters are focused squarely on what Charles is describing is drilling into the halo mineralization to open that up. I mean, a lot of that, just for clarity, a lot of that halo mineralization that we see in our model, we know it's there, is calculated as waste. And so that's the opportunity for us, is to get some drill density in there, get some data, and convert what is being calculated as effectively an expense and turn that into a profit center for this mine and assist in our economics, increase the tons, lower our strip, increase the contained metal, and ultimately be from our perspective, that's clearly where we're going to get the best ROI on our investment, is focus on optimizing, or just, as I said, converting as much waste to ore as possible. And then later, in terms of next year, or Q2, we're going to start evaluating looking outside of the pit. But right now, it's all about doing what Charles is talking about, is optimizing.
Okay.
The ore.
Q2 next year.
Q2 this year. So we're not even thinking about it. So just to step back right now. It's all about the 60,000 meters in the pit.
Yep.
Later in Q2 of this year, we're going to start thinking about and perhaps talking about a drill program outside of the Springer Perry pit, because, as Charles also indicated, we've got the third and the fourth mine, which comprise the Opemiska, which is the Cook and the Robitaille, and then there's an entire trend in Chapais-Chibougamau district along the Guillaume Fault, which we have 13 kilometers of, that's never been properly evaluated and explored, certainly not in the context of an open pit mineralization. So we've got more targets than we can practically focus on right now, due to all sorts of limitations but time and sort of brain power. So we had to sort of evaluate. We got that resource come in September. We tore it apart from a resource perspective and understood where the holes are. Where can we make this better? That's what we're focused on right now. But my message is, it's just the beginning. This project has a huge expansion potential beyond what we're focused on today, and we're going to get to that later in the year once this drill program is well matured and underway.
Thank you. That's really useful. And just while you're talking, I was kind of just thinking about, imagine you had a strip ratio of 5-to-1. Just imagine you had. If you had 80 odd million tons, you'd have 5 times that as waste, so you'd have 400 million tons of waste. But if you can take 20 million tons and turn it into resource, take it from the inferred kind of up into your into your pit, that would change you from 80 to 400 to 100 to 380.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
you get the math. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the 3.8-to-1 against a 5-to-1. It's just that simple conversion.
That's right.
It's almost exponential. If you can convert that waste into ore, the impact on your strip ratio is, as the math is phenomenal, and so that's exactly where we're focused.
Yeah. So even if our average grade goes down, it doesn't really matter, because the quantity of metal, we have a lot of we have a lot of room. Okay, we have a lot of ceiling on our our resource grade. So we can really increase the amount of metal, copper metal in the system, even if we're at a slightly lower grade, because our strip ratio goes down, everything goes down, and at the end our strip ratio is going to be limited, is going to be constrained by the contact of the sill, right? So that's kind of a hard boundary, and
by the town.
And by the town, yes, but we think that we can do. We're doing some work right now to address part of that issue. One is that obviously when they did the resource last fall, it was a vanilla flavored pit, right? And because it used no rock mechanic data to suggest what angle of pit that should be used. And so we are doing some rock mechanic study preliminary work this year in order to inform the PEA eventually when we do it, because we think that because the sill, it's very competent, the gabbro is very competent. We think that we can get some much steeper angles, and as you know, just a few degrees difference in a pit wall makes a huge difference in the strip ratio. Yeah, so that's absolutely. Really that's kind of our strategy. So okay, so just to get back on the focus of what this resource, what we think we can do. So what we plan on doing this year, okay, is we're capturing a bunch of geology, okay. From the historical drill holes. We have our own geology, obviously, from our holes, but we're capturing a bunch of geology from the historical drill holes, and we're going to eliminate the veins and the halo, and we're going to start again. Okay, we're going to reinterpret this with all the data we have, and we're going to reinterpret mineralized envelopes. It's going to be called mineralized envelopes, and it's going to encompass everything, and it's going to be able to allow us to interpolate what was the halo. It's going to allow us to interpolate as the all together with the mineralized envelope. So that'll give us a much more confidence in the resource, and it'll allow us to move a lot of the material that's currently the material that's all in the inferred category, that's in the halo. It'll allow us to move a bunch of that with the drilling that we're going to do. The drill spacing was going to be maximum of about 40-50 meters. It's going to allow us to move that into the indicated category. So we expect that we're going to increase the amount of tons, of economic tons in the deposit, and decrease the strip ratio, and have less an impact on the town, and overall just improve the quantity of metal, basically at the cost of a slight decrease in the grade, the average grade.
Thank you. And I also noticed in your presentation that you talk about historic recoveries being good. Have you done any work on the lower grade material? Because you said that it's hard to see in the ore. The geologists, I mean, will you? How visual will it be between? Presumably, they can see the difference between the gabbro and the volcanics, but between the ore and the non. Does the grain?
We analyze everything. We analyze everything.
Have you done petrographic studies? Have you done metallurgical test work on the low grade material?
There is a student that just finished a master's degree, and he did some petrography, and it's essentially the same thing, except that the grades are lower, but everything is all in structures, in fractures. So we do expect that the liberation is going to be very favorable for that stuff. But we're doing some testing this year because the average grade is lower, considerably lower. So we do expect that we're going to get a lower recoveries. But on the other hand, this is 30 years later, and metallurgical technology has improved, at least qualitatively, if not, and quantitatively, things have improved quite a bit. So we think that the key factor, or not key factor, but one of the things that we're watching out for really is our gold recoveries.
I was going to ask, does the gold go in the chalcopyrite, or do you have a gravity? Is there a free gold element?
Okay, so the answer to that is that they for most of the history of the mine, the only recovery gold from that went into the chalcopyrite in the concentrate and was shipped to the Horn smelter. And when they decided to mine the Cook mine, that deposit is similar. It's structural deposit, very similar to the rest, but it's dominated by gold. So it has about a bit over 5 grams of gold that they mined on average, and about 0.8, 0.7, 0.8 copper. And they found that so the historical recoveries of gold was about 80%. Okay, and but they found that by adding a gravity circuit, they were able to increase the recoveries of gold to over 85%, and they consider that to be sufficient for in their trade-off studies at the time. It was towards the end of the mine, and they figured that was sufficient. So that's going to be obviously part of our exercise, but we will also do some initial testing to see, you know, what it would look like if we were to produce a sulfide con after floating the copper, and you know, whether we could get by cyanidation, by regrinding cyanidation, whether we get a higher recovery of gold. But we're looking at probably 5, maybe 10% at the most improved recovery. It could be significant, particularly in the southern part of the deposit, because as we get closer to the Gwillim Fault, the gold grades tend to increase.
And what are the other sulfides in there apart from chalcopyrite? Is it pyrite and pyrrhotite?
Mainly it's pyrrhotite, pyrite pyrrhotite for the most part. Pyrite pyrrhotite.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of sphalerite here and there. There's a little bit of cobaltite. There's a couple of other minerals, but for the most part, when you look at the overall enrichment, it's pretty low. Okay, so yeah, they're there, but they're not all that volumetrically significant.
Great. And could you pull up a map of the other of the kind of the region and the other? In the presentation, you've got the cross faults, the Chibougamau and the VMS trend. I think that's probably the best one, just so I can understand.
Slide 13, I believe.
Where you're going to be going to in Q2 and beyond.
Yeah.
Infinity and beyond.
Yeah. So the reason why I showed the things this way, it's obviously very cartoonish. The reality is in detail quite different. But it does highlight a couple of important things that we see. First of all, it shows the spatial relationship between the Gwillim Fault and these deposits in Chapais. All of these deposits are located within either the Venture or Bourbeau sills, which are the same age. These are stacked layered sills, part of what we call the Cummings complex in the Chibougamau area, and these were deformed initially and verticalized, and then they were redeformed, and that's what produced these parasitic fold structures on the edge of the Gwillim Fault. And but the Gwillim Fault is not alone. It's part of a network of northeast trending faults and northwest trending parasitic or satellite or splay structures that are coming off, and it's these northeast and northwest directions that are the most important for mineralization. Not just here, but it's also in Chibougamau. The mineralizations in the camp, the central camp, they're either in northeast or northwest trending structures. So we make a direct comparison of the mineralization here that we see in the Chapais district with what people see in the Chibougamau district. We think it's the same event. Okay, it's just a question of how you interpret that mineralization that differs, but it's essentially we're looking at the same event. So this the Gwillim Fault is parallel to another structure that we found on the property. It's called the Scott Fault. And that structure is not only parallel to it, but it's also it's a structure that is related to a whole series of these northeast structures that originally were formed when you had the very intense north-south compression and everything became vertical. They reached a point where you couldn't deform anything anymore. So everything broke along these northeast structures, and they started to move in a sinistral fashion. They started to move, okay, and that was the origin of the fold structures at Chapais, the Opemiska property. Okay, that's how we understand it. And so there are other structures like that. There's also bridging structures like the Chibougamau copper fault, which is well known. Okay, and the mineralization is there's mineralization along these structures, along these northeast structures, but most of the mineralization we found in the camp is on splays that are oriented either east-west or northwest.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
How much of the exploration in this area has been done, in a sense? Because I remember Falconbridge famously and Noranda famously were just on the hunt for VMS, not just, but they really focused their search for VMS projects. Is there glacial till here? Can you see outcrop? Has there been auger drilling? What's the geochemistry look like? How mature is this as an exploration environment? Well,
in terms of our interpretation, it's not mature at all. Okay, there has been a lot of work in the area. All of the if you say wildcat drilling was all focused on drilling geophysical anomalies. Okay, it was the only reason why Springer was discovered was because it outcropped, and all of the other deposits in the Chapais district were discovered as near mine exploration, where they were doing exploration drilling either from underground or from surface, and they just came upon these deposits through brute force drilling
and luck.
Yeah, sorry, no, for sure. But what I'm trying to get at is that when you look at the regional context in relation to the model, the metallogenic model that we're proposing for the camp, it opens up a lot of areas, and there's a lot of areas where the Gwillim fault and the Scott fault and the Chibougamau copper fault, where they intersect favorable lithologies, for instance, gabbros, or mafic sills and stuff like that, and these areas, some of these areas have been drilled, and sometimes they get some stray results, but they've never been able to really build it up into a significant tonnage. But we believe that with a combination of high resolution magnetics, okay, which we're doing right now at 50 meter spacing with a very light helicopter, and interpreting that information, that data in relation to our understanding of the deformation along the Gwillim fault, and then following up on those structures, on those interpreted structures, following up with either ground prospecting or IP surveying, because this is an important point, Merlin, is that the mineralization at Chapais does not respond to geophysics. Okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't respond to it. So it doesn't give you EM targets. It'll give you an IP target if you're right on top of it. But otherwise, the geophysics doesn't really respond very well.
Charles, could you drop the image again, please?
Sorry.
That's okay. So really what it looks as if you're going to be doing is you're doing a project-wide gravity survey, which will give you structure. Mag survey, which will give you structure, and it should help you be able to map geological units. You should be able to see the gabbros. You should be able to see the favorable horizons, and then I don't know how much outcrop there is, but it sounds as if the historic exploration is focused on the small amounts of outcrop. I worked in northern Sweden.
There's a lot of till.
And do you know what the depth is to the?
It's not very deep. It's not very deep. Typically, it's less than 20 meters, and on average, I would say it's less than 10 meters. Okay, but still 10 meters is 30 feet, right? I mean, it's still it only gives you on the order of less than 5% outcrop. But the thing, and there is magnetics data for the whole area, but it's at 200 meters. Okay, the 200 meter line spacing is great for finding VMS deposits, but when you're trying to interpret fine grained structures, satellite structures around fault zones and stuff like that, you can't get enough resolution on your magnetics, right? So that's really what we're trying to do. Get the maximum resolution at 50 meters, which is a practical limit for airborne. Maybe with the drone you could do it better than that. But for a small helicopter, our data, and we know from discussing this issue with a bunch of with other people and geophysicists, and they say that 50 meter heliborne is like amazing data. Okay, in terms
yeah,
of,
it is. I've worked on similar data sets. And have you thought about doing ionic leach geochemistry or getting a power auger in to
that's I've worked with a lot of geochemistry. I've been disappointed for the most part with that. But to be frank, Kennerland have had success, significant eye-opening success up in Troilus nearby, and it's something that I'm aware of, that, you know, and how they did it. And it turned, they initially started with till sampling, and they found out that they could get basically the same result with just straight soil sampling. And that really freaked me out when I found out, because like I said, we've been doing a lot of soil geochemistry in the Abitibi for a long time, okay, with very little result. Okay, with very little result. And but here, remember, we're not in the clay belt. Okay, so we're in the tills. You know, a lot of lodgement till near surface comes to near surface, and so we can see we can see the relationship between the material in the tills and the bedrock. So yeah, in principle it should work. How to get it to work, that's another issue. But I think that firstly, what we need to do is like fly it, prospect it, and then, you know, where we have the interesting geology, there's already some targets that we've identified that we need to look at. Like, for instance, under Springer Lake, it's right off the edge of the Gwillim Fault, and there's historical drilling there that had significant results. And we know from our interpretation that this is part of another splay structure off the Gwillim Fault, and it was drilled as a one-off thing that didn't intersect economic grade over economic width, and therefore they walked away. Okay, that's typically what would happen in these things. So we need to look at these things carefully and follow up on the historical results.
So Merlin, I think just to sort of sum it up there from my seat, it's you know, we're clearly in a very mature district, a lot of mining, a lot of exploration, but clearly we've shown a different interpretation of how the Springer Perry is sort of manifests itself and how we're interpreting it. But I think that can be extrapolated across the entire Gwillim Fault and perhaps other areas in this district. It just hasn't been approached and interpreted the way we have, and hence the exploration techniques and potential discoveries outside of what we're, you know, laser focused on right now hasn't been evaluated. And so we're going to get there. Our interpretation of this is just the beginning. So we've got a very, you know, great start with a 100 million ton pit in the middle of Quebec with all this great infrastructure. We're going to continue to move that forward and define that. That's a mine in our minds today, and it's only going to get better. But then beyond that, there's a ton of work to do. So, you know, in summation, it's early days on this project.
It is really early days. Thank you both. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you both. I've got a much better understanding of the geology and the kind of the concept, the exploration concept, and the way that you're working it. Charles, I think you and I could sit in a camp and talk about exploration strategy for a day, but perhaps not in this forum. Good luck with the 60,000 meters that'll be from now over the next 6 months. Good luck with the conclusion of the MAG survey and how that informs your exploration going forwards. I'll be looking to see your news flow with great interest. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merlin. Pleasure.